What is wrong? Put the music back on. I'm gonna cut the bitch that did this.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Screenstars. I'm here today to bring you my review for the 2025 Netflix slasher film Fear Street Prom Queen. The film is co-written and directed by Matt Palmer and it stars India Fowler, Susanna Son, Fina Straza, Catherine Waterson, Lily Taylor and Chris Klein. Right, okay. Now the film follows Shady Town again. If you remember the Fear Street films that Netflix put out, the trilogy of films in 2021, which I did review on the channel and quite enjoyed. This is another tale in the prominent book series, I believe. And it's set in 1988. There is a high school that is imminently about to have its high school prom. There are a number of girls who are in the running to be prom queen, and they will be voting on the night. Now, some girls are absolutely desperate to be the prom queen. One in particular, Tiffany, it's almost like it's expected that she's going to be doing it. She's the real mean girl in the school. She's really horrible to everybody, but she's like Miss Popular. But there is an underdog. We've got Laurie Granger, who has got a shady past, really. Essentially, her dad was murdered, I think it was 10 years previously, 78. Her mother was blamed by the town, but, obviously was never convicted or anything. But she wants to be prom queen as well, so she's throwing a hat into the ring. But there is a masked killer on the loose that is determined to trim the herd, if you like, and take out a lot of the contenders for prom queen, leading to an absolute bloodbath on the night of the party itself. Right, what are my thoughts on Fear Street Prom Queen? Well, as I mentioned, I did personally quite enjoy the Fear Street trilogy of films that we got on Netflix in 2021. I really liked how they kind of intertwined and stuff. I thought they were good. I mean, they were flawed, yes, but overall I really enjoyed them, and I like the fact that you got like a different flavour, like each time, different eras sort of thing. So I was up for checking out another Fear Street film. And it was going down the very familiar route, obviously, of, the slasher link to prom queens and prom night and all that kind of stuff. And we've had slasher films, directly themed on that as well in the past. So, I mean, it's not going for what you would describe as originality here. And I think that is probably the biggest flaw with this film is it is very, very generic. There's very little here that you haven't seen before and probably seen better. Like I say, it ticks a lot of tropes that you would see in a slasher film, but it's not what I would describe either as a bad film. You know what I mean? I think there is some quality here. There's some fun to be had here if you're a fan of slashers. I personally thought like the kills here were quite fun, very graphic and over the top kills. Limbs getting chopped off, heads getting chopped off, and lots of blood. And so if you're liking that sort of stuff in your slashers, sometimes these teenage slashers they kind of they go for the tame approach and you barely see anything. Well, there's none of that here. You really doesn't leave a lot to the imagination in regards to the kills here. Unfortunately, while the kills are entertaining and a lot of fun, the killer is so predictable. I think within probably after the first kill, something like that. Basically, I had an idea in my head who I thought the killer was, and I was absolutely right. And it's not going to take a rocket scientist to figure this one out, guys. So there's very little here in the way of mystery. And it's one of those films. I mean, like I say, it's set in the 80s, so it's got that 80s vibe going for it. It's got that synth-heavy soundtrack, but it's also got. It's one of those films with an 80s soundtrack. So blatant and so in your face. It's like 80s song after 80s songs. It's like stuffing it down your face, reminding you this is set in the 80s, you know, 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 and it's just like, God, I know. And I know it's a party, and they're playing music and this kind of stuff, but it just grated after a while. And, you know, the 80s is my era, really. I mean, I didn't mind the vast majority of the songs they were playing, but it just felt like they were just kind of, you know, just force feeding it to you, sort of thing. And then there's some real cringe moments here that really don't suit the film. There's a dance off here in the film where you've got like this character, Laurie Granger, who I actually quite liked as the final girl, as you could, I'm going to describe her as, because she is really. I quite liked her character. I found her quite relatable, and she was decent. And then she has like a dance off with the head competition, I suppose, for the prom queen, Tiffany. And it's this weird dance off, and it just doesn't suit the film. I don't know. I mean, there's an occasional tinge of comedy here that I don't know. It doesn't really hit the mark. You're not sure if it's tongue in cheek. Now, I think for me, if a slasher film's going for that, it needs to be a little bit more obvious than it is here. I think it kind of plays around with the tone of the film here occasionally, and it kind of hurts the film occasionally when it does do that. But, you know, it's a very, very standard slasher. It doesn't do anything new or particularly original, but it kind of gives you what it says on the tin. If you look, if you're going into this film and it's like Fear Street stroke Prom Queen and it's a slasher film, what you're processing in your brain, what you're going to see in that film, you pretty much get it all here. It's not false advertising. It's not pretending to be anything else. It is exactly that. It's a slasher film themed around prom night. And it's very, very self-aware of what it is for the most part. And it delivers. You know, it absolutely gives you what you want from a slasher film themed around that. While I think this is not as good as the other Fear Streets that I saw, the trilogy in 2021, again, I was perfectly entertained with this, and I thought it was a lot of fun. You know what I mean? And I did enjoy the kills, even though the killer was not very memorable and very, very easy to figure out. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Fear Street Prom Queen. It's on Netflix right now. Let me know your thoughts if you've seen it or if you're planning to see it, and I will of course be back with plenty more reviews and content on the channel very, very soon.